Finnish author, freelance journalist, and television producer Rauli Virtanen has covered wars and conflicts since the Vietnam War in 1972 and visited every independent state in the world. He has worked for all the major Finnish print and electronic media to the recognition of two top journalism awards in Finland. He has also written lots of books about his world travels and work as a foreign correspondent. And he's my guest today in this edition of Addis Dialogue. With it, I'm Shifaralago and you served us. Rauli, thank you so much for being my guest.
My pleasure to be your guest. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Just to start off, Rauli, let's take a little bit time and talk about yourself as a global journalist with lots of experience and lots of expertise in the area.
All right. Basically, you already mentioned that my first experience in the war area was Vietnam in 1972. Before that, I had taken a long trip in southern North America. I interrupted my studies at the University of Tampere in Finland, and I was specializing in Latin American affairs, and then traveled backpacking and hitchhiking in southern North America for 10 months, and then joined one of the big daily newspapers in Helsinki, and wanted to go to Vietnam, and that was for a young man, of course, quite an experience, and not as you have seen in the movies about Vietnam, but anyway, very different that I had been used to it. And I'm still, when I'm at the university talking to students about Vietnam War, of course, they look at me that this guy must be 100 years old and who remembers War of Vietnam, but whatever. But it's playing a major role in journalism, and especially because that was the first war that came in colors. It was almost directly sent to the many American living rooms, and it was really impacting the public opinion. And the academics are still arguing how much did it impact these demonstrations and huge manifestations against the war. Was that the impact that the United States didn't win the war and they had to leave the theater? And it also showed, of course, how even a small country with a very nationalistic ideas and how they were able as underdogs to fight a mighty enemy that was bombing them with B-52 bombs and carpet bombing and using Agent Orange, etc., which is, if ever the young people, when they go to Vietnam, I ask them to visit the museum, a war museum, and see all those things. And people of my age and younger one, they still remember those iconic photographs of the napalm girl taken by Nick Ut, the girl who was completely burned by napalm bombs, and they remember the My Lai massacre that the Americans did in the village of My Lai, and other things. So the war in Vietnam played a very important role, also leading to the following events. I was just recently in Afghanistan. The Americans they still had the trauma of Vietnam, so they decided that let's make Afghanistan a Vietnam for Soviet Union. And so they started to equip and arm the what we call the freedom fighters, Mujahideen, all factions, and with Pakistan, with Saudi Arabia, and during in the course of years and decades, they were building up Islamic fighters that later on became allies of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden's forces, and also finally Taliban. So all these events were because of Vietnam, because the United States wanted Soviet Union to have another Vietnam, and then Soviet Union had to leave 10 years after that fight. So that's one importance. And there are still people who claim, academics saying that the United States so far still hasn't recovered of the trauma of Vietnam, and of course now Afghanistan and other trauma, very badly orchestrated withdrawal, like betraying the Afghan people, giving them on a silver plate to Taliban. I noticed very disturbing signs regarding information, because Yugoslavia was consisting of 3 different religions. They had the Catholics, they had the Orthodox Serbs, and then they had the Muslims, and then even religious figures they were using these religious issues in order to make people to hate each other, spreading lies. That time we didn't have Twitter or Facebook, not so strong, but by word by mouth, and also using history as a pretext.
You know what, Rauli, I'm very happy to meet you, because you have a lot of experience in the journalism profession. You know, if I'm not mistaken, more than 50 years in this. Yeah, okay. But then, you know, but then this very profession is being tainted by all sorts of unprincipled and unethical practices by especially some practitioners from the West. You know, be it fake news, omissions, exaggerations, etc. What have you observed in this regard, and what are some of your takes here?
Well, there are many disturbing developments, but we could start with the social media. And I noticed that before this conflict in your country, very few people were in Twitter, and it's the same applies to, I think, all of Africa. Or let's say when I was covering the Arab Spring, I mean, most of the people were relying on Facebook and using Facebook as a platform, you know, to get people together, and so that people in Egypt, they would know what was happening first in Tunisia, where it's basically started, or Iran, but Tunisia anyway, and then going all the way to Yemen. And so that influence was there, which is not really, it's more as a weapon for demonstrations than spreading information. But at the same time, also in Western countries, people are relying more and more on news on Facebook and Twitter, which I find disturbing. Of course, I mean, that's very understandable if the traditional media is completely government controlled, or if you live in Lukashenko's Belarus or dictatorships. I mean, then it's very good that we have social media, and then we have Facebook, and we have Twitter. Of course, those are also, as you know, very much controlled by many sovereign and big countries. So that is one thing. But so my point is that we should do our best in all the countries in the West and East, that we should have a strong traditional independent media that people can rely. Like in my country, in Finland, people trust mostly Channel 1, like Finnish broadcasting corporation, and we need public broadcasting system, because commercial TVs, commercial channels, they are not that reliable. All the studies show that the public funded public broadcasting is the one. So we need that. And then a very basic thing that I always say, that we should teach people already from the elementary school about the media skill, how to understand, how to read media. The teachers should have this, and the journalists like myself, like you, or I have some colleagues who are doing, if we live in Finland, but they're doing in Somalia, and teaching local journalists and teaching people and classes how to work with the media, how to read media, how to make the difference between fake news, propaganda, or disinformation, and avoiding the code of conducts in the social media, that avoiding hate speech, etc. We are getting stereotypes of people, like in the Middle East, we show only news, or some cases in Africa, which are basically negative, bad news. It can be suicide bombings, war, famine, and these kind of things. But we never show happy, normal people and talk to them, ask them about their lives, their expectations, and so that we could feel a little bit same and togetherness with these people. Yeah. And instead we are becoming that, wondering that those people, let's say Middle East with Islamophobia is a very good example, that they are very dangerous people, because all the news we hear that they are causing problem and we don't want to see them. We don't want them to come to Europe. We are building Fortress Europe. Don't come to Europe. I mean, etc. So this trend is very worrying when I'm comparing it to the 1970s and 80s, when people were genuinely interested in European countries, what is happening in the developing world, and we had correspondence and people were traveling and meeting each other and communicating differently. So now we are building a gap between us and COVID. Of course, it's making it even worse. We can't even travel to many places to meet the friendly people of Ethiopia or whatever country, and so you are becoming more distant, if you know what I mean. Of course, it's good to have video meetings instead of flying and causing climate change, making it worse. But always face-to-face meetings with people. And of course, then one thing regarding Ethiopia, I think why there has been such a war in Twitter, and two bubbles, one siding the Ethiopian government and one siding the Tigray thing, is that we had very little reliable eyewitness reporting from the place. So always one should somehow try to make it possible and access to the foreign journalists, and of course those foreign journalists who hopefully are living in a country, living in the area, understanding the situation, and etc. I hope the news organizations will have enough finances to send people to those places and let them to stay longer than 1 day or 2 days, instead of sending quick report and very short report and forgetting to tell many other things that are relevant there.
Western media outlets such as CNN have, as you know, huge audience, and I think this demands a huge task on the part of Ethiopia to refute some of its erroneous narratives, misinformation and disinformation. So what should Ethiopian media outlets do to counter or to correct such misguided information or, erroneous propaganda?
Well, yeah. If you can show that these are not the facts, and then a reliable source will give you an information, and then you're going to the spot and showing, like in Ethiopia's case, you could show that this humanitarian assistance relief convoy has been destroyed or hijacked by the other side, the Tigray people, like we have read, and things like that, and then interviewing and people talking there. But it's very difficult. I mean, I'm not so keen that you should. I don't think you should show so much about fighting these big organizations like CNN or whatever. I mean, just stay solid and tell the facts and provide as much as you can the information, and then influence people. And of course, CNN is very big worldwide, and they. I'm not sure how many Ethiopians are watching CNN, but it's being watched. And in this case, of course, in the African edition, I don't myself watch CNN very much at all. I used to watch it when it was breaking out. You remember the first 24-hour news during the Gulf War, etc. So, but there is no clear recipe how to counter. But always the best thing is to counter what you find, what you may think is one-sided or disinformation or propaganda. Just counter it with facts, and and also in inviting, because sometimes, I'm not talking about now, but CNN, because journalists are not very eager to criticize each other, but in some cases, I know some countries that have been completely blocking journalists out. So then they have decided that, okay, let's invite a star correspondent from CNN and show him or her the things like they did in Myanmar and in Burma, which I'm covering at the moment, and with the consequence that the people that they were talking to, interviewing, were ending up in trouble. But it's always better to be polite than to be angry at any channel, instead of inviting them and telling them that, please, if you have a chance, come back again, and we'll show you what we think is worthwhile reporting, and you can interview, talk to our leaders, and talk to our people, and etc. So the friendly approach always works better than starting the war. And in that case, the people of the information department, any government, they are in a very, very important role, how they handle the foreign media, because foreign media is sometimes too sensitive, and they are very sensitive and touchy. If they are not having a red carpet, they get angry and they may report something else. So things like that. But open access and facts, I mean, that's the same. Those are the things that don't change in 50 years. I mean, you give access, you're friendly, you give interviews, and you do your best explaining and trying to explain. But of course, among journalists, I mean, we are not all, it happens to every profession. I mean, we are not all perfect. We have good apples and bad apples, and we have people with agenda, different agenda, etc. So it's difficult.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe what in your opinion should be done so that international media outlets begin to be a voice for the voiceless, or to promote democracy as well as global justice, as opposed to optimizing profit and satisfying the liberal interests?
Yeah, that's you actually already mentioned it. That I mean, this promoting democracy and all the accomplishments that have been done before, and then trying to look for peaceful solutions even in a critical time. But now I think the tide is turning, that there's probably more willingness, more goodwill to start to talk when different participants have noticed what the results have been, and this war is never the answer. It always disturbs me when European and Western mediators are trying to solve problems like in continents like in Africa. I think, and I know that African Union has been training more and more, and people, the mediators, African mediators, to mediate with the people. So, because this is a bit like a colonialistic approach that we are coming from Europe or Northern Europe to tell you how to make the peace, etc. with that, because we would never fully understand the situation. Of course, sometimes you need a independent mediator, like a friend of mine, President Martti Ahtisaari, who won the Nobel Peace Prize as like your prime minister. So he got the Peace Prize mainly because he was leading the Namibia into independence. But Namibia was a different case. I prefer you have your own Nelson Mandelas in Africa, and I had the possibility to spend a few days with Nelson Mandela. So that's a good sign, good leadership.
Yeah. Okay. With more and more people relying on social media as a source of news, there are legitimate concerns that fake news hate speech and disinformation could influence audiences unable to distinguish truth from fact or news from propaganda. So, in your view, of course, you touched it earlier, how can the world overcome this infodemic disease, as some call it?
Yeah, that's basically what I was referring earlier, that we just have to be tirelessly educating people from the elementary school onwards regarding how to read media, and I, especially Twitter, which I myself I don't like it too much, or there are some areas I don't want to go, and I see so much, hate speech there, even regarding issues in my country. So much there's racism and hate speech and disinformation, etc. And people attacking each other, personalities, etc. So sometimes if you start to read, you become really gloomy and depressed. So I'm trying to stay away. So I follow mainly there's some news channels and experts who I'm rating and who know that they wouldn't they are not there to trying to create a war in Twitter or insult. They are not there to insult people. So that's the thing. But the thing is, of course, it's democratic. I mean, anybody can say anything in Twitter. And as you are referring to, how can an average person, how can he or she make the difference that without knowing about this person, and should he be, maybe if he thinks or she thinks that what that person is writing at actually that appeals to me, and then he gets, okay, that's very good, without knowing it. So it's a very dangerous place, and on a very thin ice you are in Twitter. But as we know, in case of Ethiopia, it's became with this conflict a very important arena. I think it started first in the United States, where we had all the bad experience with the Trump administration and that Twitter campaign, and Trump being blocked out finally. So the Ethiopians in the United States who were sympathetic to the Tigray's TPLF's cause, they started. So in a way, you can correct me if I'm not right, and then the other groups joined in, and there has been a battle of two bubbles there, and trying to influence each other, and I think it's not so much. It's more propaganda. If we are talking propaganda in a positive way, that you are expressing your side more that than disinformation.
Rauli, as a journalist with great expertise in covering wars and conflicts, what is your message to Western media outlets, to some Western media outlets, of course, that are trying to cover the conflicts in Ethiopia, which has been instigated by the terrorist TPLF?
Well, like I mentioned before, I'm looking forward, if time allows, COVID allows, and etc., to visit your country and then visit my friends there and see it with my own eyes, and the message is the same to Western media or Eastern media. If you have RT, Russian media, or Chinese Xinhua media, whatever, to come there and spend time and talk to people and listen to different stories, different people, and try to be balanced. I mean, journalism has always been based on objectivity, that you just don't tell one-sided story, and especially not without double checking the facts. So that's basically. So hopefully, if they are having access there, I'm sure they will get. The problem is that when this conflict will be away from news, like Afghanistan is now away from news, not anymore in headlines, because nothing sensational is happening, no big attacks, not so many people being killed. So the world media is forgetting. Then it's very difficult for Ethiopians to say, come and visit our country report, because the journalists say, but it's very quiet there. Why should I come there? I mean, it's very quiet. So that's when one should spend more time there and explain the background or what happened, or explain what might be the future, etc., and listen to people. So that's and for that we need, like I've been doing lately, I did a 1-hour documentary on Afghanistan. So we need documentaries where you can have 10, 20, 30 people expressing their views, and where in case of Afghanistan, I was referring to my first trip there 40 years ago, and how things happened there and development. So one should stay in a place and talk, and for that you need documentaries or longer newspaper magazine articles. But for the news, if I'm thinking whatever big news channel they are in Nairobi, I mean, it's very difficult to ask them to come to Ethiopia or any country if it's completely peaceful, unless they are doing a travel story, which is of course great. Ethiopia has so many beautiful places, or they can do a story about Ethiopian coffee, but that's not the hard news, and that's not what you are fighting in Twitter, where the war is in Twitter. They don't fight about the coffee or Lalibela or tourist attractions. They are trying to attack each other and blaming each other. So, but like in my case, I've been to your country many times, and I'm still proud that we have been able to together with your people to develop the water, irrigate the water systems there, and getting so many wells, and the water projects are the bright spot of the Finnish development.
Well, Rauli, thank you so much for your wonderful ideas and for your time as well.
Thank you very much, and all the best to all the viewers, and warmest regards.
Well, the viewers, with that we come to the end of today's program. Many thanks for your company so far. Until I see you next time with another program, it's goodbye from the Shivaralak. Bye-bye.
اشتاقنا